Hello YouTubers, it's Jonathan here. I am very fortunate to be joined by quite a special man that's come to Bristol for the Bristol Jazz and Blues Festival, a chap called Riccardi, who's the archivist at Louis Armstrong House Museum. Say hello, Ricky.
Hello, Ricky.
So Ricky, you're going to do an interview for BBC Radio Bristol as well. Tell us how you got into this job. What was it about Louis Armstrong that really got you started?
When I was 15 years old, I saw the movie The Glenn Miller Story with Jimmy Stewart, and Armstrong comes on in the middle. He does Basin Street Blues, and I knew who he was, but I had never really experienced him. And the whole package, seeing him, hearing the horn, watching him, his scat singing, everything, I said, all right, I need to know more about this guy. So I started immediately going to the local library, listening to cassettes and reading books, and I was 15 years old. This was 1995. And back then, the line of thinking around Armstrong was that he was only a genius in the 20s. And then after that, he kind of, he went commercial. He became a sellout. He was an Uncle Tom. All this stuff was being thrown at him. And so I'm a high school student, and I'm saying, you know what? I don't believe this. So I kept on studying and studying and studying. And I went to Rutgers. I got a master's in jazz history and research. I wrote a thesis on the last 25 years of Louis's life, started a blog, published a book, started working for the Armstrong House, and now, 20 years after that first moment, I am all Armstrong all the time.
Why Louis? Why Louis in particular versus any other jazz star from the 20s and 30s?
For me, I think it was the joy that spoke to me. I mean, he just exuded and radiated such joy. He makes you feel good. And the first time I saw him in that movie, I was just smiling. I'm like, wow, this guy is great. And then you hear the music, and it's just unmatchable. So to this day, whenever I'm kind of stressed out or whatever, just 3 minutes of any Louis Armstrong record is better than any narcotic or any legal or illegal substance.
So tell us how you came to be involved with the Louis Armstrong House Museum.
The first time I went to the Louis Armstrong House Museum, I was just a researcher. I was researching my book. I knew I wanted to write a book about the last 25 years of Louis's life. I had done all the research I can do. I had interviewed everybody I could interview. All that was really missing was Louis himself. So in January '06, I went, I took a tour of the Armstrong House, and I made an appointment at the Armstrong Archives where they had all of Louis's private reel-to-reel tapes. Hours and hours and hours of him discussing music and women and marijuana and anything else that appealed to him. And the first tape I listened to, he basically outlined all the themes of my book, that he was playing better than ever in the 1950s and all this stuff. And I became a regular there, '06, '07, '08. Once a month or so, I would go up and listen to as many tapes as I could. I would transcribe them. And this whole time, I'm writing this book, I'm writing this blog. But my day job was I was a house painter. My father was a painting contractor in New Jersey, and I needed to do something to make a paycheck. But finally, in 2009, I saw a job posting for an archivist. And I had never gone to library school for a day. I was a journalism major and a master's in jazz history and research. But I knew Louis Armstrong backwards. And so I applied for the job. And I just hoped that they would want to hire an Armstrong expert instead of a library expert. And fortunately, the interview was great. And they called me into the Armstrong Archives. They showed me one box of photos, and I looked at the first photo, and I knew every member in the band. I knew where it was. I knew what month it was. And about 2 hours later, they offered me the job. So that was 6 years ago. And, it's just a thrill. It's the world's largest archives for a single jazz musician. And, I get paid to run it. It's kind of absurd when I think about it.
Do you think you're quite a lucky man to be doing this job for a living?
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Other people might say they're lucky and this and that. Other people probably make more money than I do and all that, but it doesn't matter because every morning Louis Armstrong's waiting for me, and I get to spend 8-9 hours a day processing his collection, cataloging his tapes, meeting researchers, meeting people all over the world, and to be able to do that and get paid for it is really a dream come true.
So, Ricky, when you think about the many recordings that Louis Armstrong made, which is your favourite period of Armstrong recordings?
Every Louis Armstrong recording has something to recommend, but for me, the 1950s, that's my decade. And I believe it was his decade, too. There's multiple interviews where he says that he was playing better trumpet in the 1950s than any other time in his life. All you have to do is listen to Louis Armstrong plays W.C. Handy, or Satch plays Fats, Louis and the Angels, Ella and Louis. There's so many seminal albums from that decade. I mean, he is just singing better than ever, playing better than ever. And I'm on a never-ending crusade to get more people to listen to that decade.
Is it just a sign of how popular he was that he transcended a lot of music and became almost, a worldwide celebrity? Because even people that perhaps don't listen to jazz and don't appreciate jazz so much, they all know who Louis Armstrong is.
One of the things about Armstrong was he always said that people from where he came from had to play all kinds of music. He hated being stereotyped. He never liked the concept of styles. People would ask him, what style is your music? Do you play Dixieland? What kind of Dixieland? And he would always answer, I play good music. That's all it is good music. So Armstrong, starting in the late 1920s, they start offering him pop songs and, I Can't Give You Anything But Love and Stardust and All of Me and Body and Soul. Songs that were not being regularly covered by jazz people. And Armstrong puts all of those songs on the map. So by the end of the 1930s, they're throwing more stuff at him. They're giving him Hawaiian songs. They're giving him Cuban songs, La Cucaracha, spirituals, anything. So Armstrong was reaching audiences a lot bigger than just the hardened jazz fans. Until the very end of his life, those hardcore jazz fans, they wanted him just to keep playing trumpet specialties and just keep playing the way he did in the early 1920s. But Armstrong was too smart for that, and he kept on tailoring his music for as many people as possible, which is why he continues getting more and more popular with each passing year of his career.
And the house in Queens, is very unique. I've been there myself, and it's very interesting decor. How did the house come into existence as a museum?
When Armstrong died in 1971, his wife Lucille took great care of the house. She took great care of Louis's stuff. She never sold anything. She never got rid of it. She had the house designated a National Historic Landmark in 1976. So in her mind, she always envisioned that one day it would be a museum. And sure enough, after she died, Queens College took over the house. And the first thing they did was create the Armstrong Archives, based out of all of Armstrong's private collections and everything. But the house took about $5 million and many years of restoration before it opened to the public in 2003. And now, after 11 years, visitation is at an all-time high, and people come from all over the world, including school groups, every single day just to see how Louis Armstrong lived. Everything in the house is completely original and authentic, and there's really nothing else like it for another jazz musician.
Do you think there's a future in Louis Armstrong's music? Because a lot of it was recorded quite a while, now, and a lot of time has passed since he made a lot of his really seminal recordings. Is there still a future in it?
Louis Armstrong is going nowhere. For somebody who was born in 1901 and died 40 years ago, there aren't many other entertainers from that period who there is still such interest in. There's at least one new book on Armstrong published every year. Forrest Whitaker is apparently making a motion picture based on Armstrong's life. We have raised $20 million to build an education center devoted to Armstrong across the street from the Armstrong House. I think we're at the beginning of the Renaissance. A lot of people right now would think that Armstrong would start fading away. But with each passing year, there seems to be more interest. And I think 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people are going to say, who are the greats? It was Shakespeare, it was Mozart, it was Louis Armstrong. And he will always be treated like that. And we're lucky in Queens that we have all this material to continue that study for years and years to come.
Do you have a favorite Louis track?
I have about 1,000 favorite Louis Armstrong tracks, but if forced at gunpoint to choose one, I'd probably go for my favorite period, the 1950s. In 1956, Armstrong recorded a masterpiece of a version of When You're Smiling. It was a song he originally recorded in 1929, and the 1929 record's a gem. But in 56, Armstrong slowed down the tempo to a crawl, a dangerously slow tempo. Then he sings first. It's so warm. If you're not smiling at the end of the vocal, you're probably dead. And then he picks up the trumpet. And all he does is play the melody an octave higher with slight embellishments. And my goodness, it is impossible. A few trumpet players have come close, but I have never heard anybody get that sound that he gets in that last chorus of When You're Smiling. So anytime I hear it, that's all I need, and I'm very content.
Ricky, do you think that, the internet has a big part to play in kind of keeping all this stuff going?
Oh, they're the greatest people in the world. They're keeping the music alive. There's so much great music from the 20s, 30s, earlier, later. It languishes in the vaults and the archives. God bless the big record labels. I've been fortunate enough to produce some Armstrong recordings for Universal, for Sony, for Mosaic. But for the most part, those labels view 1920s and 30s jazz as something just for a niche market, for collectors, for all that stuff. And they're not really interested in making it available. So we need the internet. We need these people to throw this music up there, because thanks to Facebook, thanks to all sorts of social media, thanks to YouTube, people can type in Louis Armstrong. They can type in Big Spiderbeck. They can type in anybody, Ted Lewis, Fats Waller, and the whole world comes up in their fingertips. Then they can go on Facebook and say, hey, listen to this Freddie Keppard record I found on YouTube. And people from all around the world, either they know about the record and they chime in, or they've never heard it before and they offer their opinion. But it's like in the 1930s, there would be these hot record clubs where the collectors would get together and spin records for each other. And now it's this global thing thanks to the internet. And it's one of the things keeping Louis alive, because I run the Louis Armstrong House Museum Facebook page, and we have close to 20,000 people. And, we post almost every day photos of Louis, music from YouTube, and people go crazy. And the official Louis Armstrong Facebook page has 1.8 million people following it. So that's the hardcore kind of data to show that there is interest out there on the internet in Louis Armstrong.
So, Ricky, for people who haven't visited the Louis Armstrong House Museum, tell us why they should go.
Oh, my God. Why they should go to the Louis Armstrong House Museum. It's the greatest place in the world. I know.
Well, I know that. I've been there myself. It's great. Really, really good fun.
I know I'm biased, but the Louis Armstrong House Museum, it's a testament to the greatest jazz musician of all time, probably the greatest musician of all time. It's all original. It's all authentic. And just taking a walk around that house, you learn so much more about the man, because you can listen to his records all day and never get sick of it, never get bored. God bless him. When you see the way he lived, when you see the neighborhood he chose, when you see how humble he was and the furnishings of the house, it really brings it all together that here was a man who was a millionaire, but he wanted to live this completely normal existence, something that you just don't see anymore in today's culture, where people just do anything for money and they just go crazy with it. Louis always remained that same kind of humble kid from New Orleans. So come to the Armstrong House. You can learn a lot how to lead your own life. You can learn how Louis Armstrong led his, and you won't be disappointed or your money back.
There you go. It's on tape. Ricky, it's been a real pleasure meeting you. Thank you very much for coming to Bristol, and I hope we will see each other soon at some point in some kind of jazz guise. I'm sure it will happen.
Wherever this music is, I'm sure we'll be together again.